Last summer, I made my first bikini. I made it here on the channel, so you can go check out the video if you want to. And that kind of planted a seed. Oh my God, something in my eye. And that kind of planted the seed in my brain of like maybe exploring making my own lingerie or undergarments in general. And I think it's finally time to like dip my toe into that. I found a pattern on mood.com for this like shorts and little top ensemble. I think it's called the Apricot Ensemble, and it's sort of like a sleepwear lingerie-ish type of thing. It's very cute. I was thinking of making it with this gingham chiffon that I have had in my stash for a very long time. This will be a really like chill, for lack of a better word, chill way to like start practicing working with the kind of fabrics you need for lingerie making, like these sort of sheer, lightweight, very flimsy fabrics. I think it'll give me a chance to figure out if I really want to keep exploring this sort of sewing my own undergarments / lingerie world or not. From what I gather, we're gonna need some elastic, some eyelets, and I think those little like sizing things, like the little plastic things you get on bra straps. But I think I have everything, all of those in my stash. And if not, I can go and get some when the time comes. We have come to the first hurdle. I haven't even started cutting fabric yet. We're supposed to cut lining, which I don't have any of. I don't want to go and buy any, to be honest. Everything that I have that remotely matches this fabric is way too stiff for this. So not really something I want to do. Anyway, so what I've decided to do is, because I have a ton of this fabric, like 3 or 4 meters of this stuff, I think I'm just gonna do both the lining and the main from this. That does mean it's still gonna remain sheer, but not something I'm really worried about since it's sleepwear. I also don't have any bra cups. Again, don't want to buy any, and I don't think I want to put them in. Honestly, I don't have a good reason. I just don't want to. I think it'll be more comfortable without that. We're figuring it out. We're gonna figure it out together. Hopefully, none of these decisions that I just made will come and bite me in the butt, but if they do, I don't know. Let's get cutting. We all know accurate cutting is vital for well-made garments, but that can be super tricky with flimsy fabrics like this chiffon. So when working with this type of fabric, I bust out my cutting mat, rotary cutter, and pattern weights to make sure I cut my fabric as accurately as possible. I could use this method for everything, but it's a lot more labor intensive as I have to set everything up, and I find the rotary cutter more dangerous in my clumsy hands. And for medium and heavyweight fabrics, it doesn't really make a difference. If I had an elevated cutting table covered in cutting mats, then yeah, I probably would use this method more often. And yes, my pattern weights are rocks I painted as fairy houses. Once I had everything cut out, I looked at the instructions properly and realized that for the shorts, the fabric and lining were treated as one layer, which got me thinking if I wanted to proceed with the lining or not. I thought I'd pin both layers of fabric and try to see if I could come up with a way to do a proper full lining as I went. But before any sewing is done, I need to change the needle on my sewing machine to a 70 size, which is better for lighter weight fabrics. I'll also be using a smaller stitch length, which also helps making chiffon easier to sew and will make the seams more durable. I started by making the shorts, and first things first, I stitched the fronts together along the center seams and did the same thing for the backs. Hello, it is now the next day for you. For me, it's like almost 2 weeks since I started this. I had a flare-up, so I was spending more time just getting over that and resting, and I did some knitting, so that was nice, I guess.
It did give me time to think about my current predicament with this project. Where we left off last time, I had started attaching, like sewing the shorts. And that was about when I realized that although the pattern tells you to line everything, it's not really a lining as much as it is like an interlining, I guess. It's more like you sew both layers as if they were one. So the purpose of the lining is to combat the sheerness of the fabric, and it is optional. Like in the instructions they say you don't have to line this, even though it says on every single piece to cut extra for lining. For the top, I still haven't thought about if I'm going to line that or not, but we'll get to it when we get to it. For the shorts, I don't think it's worth it because the front and the back are not constructed in the same way. So you have a front waistband, and then you have the back. The waistband is encased into the pattern. So this is the size of the front of the shorts, and this is the back. There's quite a difference in size. We're going to be folding the back down at the waist to form a waistband to add our elastic. But the front doesn't get elasticated, and then you have a front waistband that gets sewn onto the shorts. I don't know. I just kept thinking, like going over my head, how I would line this in a way that every single seam is encased, and the way it's constructed currently doesn't feel like that's possible, or I don't have enough knowledge to do that. I am a little bit bummed because I've already cut the fabric. Yeah, I think I've decided that it will be easier and faster and less annoying to me to ignore the lining completely and just sew this without a lining. As always, Mood always wants you to do French seams, which I find annoying and time consuming, and don't like doing them because I'm lazy. So I'm going to be doing my usual serging.
I set up my serger to finish the seams and serged the center seams of the front and back, as well as the bottom edge of the leg ruffles. Then I pressed the serged edge of the ruffles as well as the center seams of the front and back, using my tailor's ham to help with the curved edge. While I have the iron on, I also prepped the back waistband for the elastic casing. I started by pressing in a 1/2 inch seam allowance using my clapper to help, since this fabric doesn't press super well and I can't exactly make the iron hotter because it might melt the fabric. Then I fold the waistband down another inch and press that in again. Next, I pinned the front waistband to the front of the shorts with right sides together. When working with slippery fabrics like this, I find using a lot of pins really helps keep everything in place. I also pinned the leg ruffles closed along the short edges. I top stitched the back waistband down along the folded edge as well as the other seams I just pinned. Then I serged the raw edges of the ruffles and front waistband. Over on the ironing board, I pressed the seam allowance of the front waistband up, and the ruffle seam allowance gets pressed to one side. Next, I pressed in the seam allowance of the remaining long edge of the front waistband, which is 1/2 inch, before folding the waistband in half and pressing again, making sure the folded edge covers the stitching line. For the ruffle hem, I press in the serged edges all around to make it easier to sew.
Then I go back over to my sewing machine to top stitch both the ruffle hems down, add the gathering stitches along the top, and sew the front waistband in place. I have run into a problem. I have the back of the shorts done. I have the front of the shorts done. And I have my ruffles ready to go. I already have my gathering stitches in, and I have the hem done. I need to press it again. So the next step on the instructions is to add the elastic to the back so that we can then sew up the side seams of the shorts, encasing the elastic. The only piece of elastic that I have that is the right size is this little bit, which I don't need to be the one to tell you is not big enough. I think I need to go and buy some. Like, I can't move on further with the shorts until I have the elastic. I've returned. I got hopefully the right elastic. I should have taken this to measure against, but yeah, it's the same. I got some of these that are like for the straps and stuff. Some more white thread. And then I also got these. There's a bodkin and also one of those like little tweezers that have a ring so you can pull elastic and stuff through casing. I do have a bodkin already, but the other one I don't have, and they only had them in sets. So, and I got some more of this yellow yarn because I'm making a sweater vest. I'm making that sweater vest on my shorts and on my Instagram and TikTok, so you can see. I'm not doing like a long video for it like this. So yeah, that was a total of $6.45. So not bad. Now that that's all purchased, we can get back to work. For the elasticated back, you need to cut a length of elastic measuring half your waist plus 2 inches. So I measured my waist, divided it by 2, and added 2. Out of habit, I also burned the edges of the elastic to avoid fraying. Then I put my new tweezer gadget to use to pull the elastic through the casing and pin each end in place at its respective edge. With the elastic in place, I pinned the front to the back along the sides and the inseam. Next, I stitched those seams, making sure to go over the elastic a couple of times to make sure it's really secure. Before pressing, I also serged those seams. To add the ruffles, I start by pinning them to the shorts with right sides together, matching the seams, and then I start pulling on the gathering stitches until the ruffle is the same size as the leg of the shorts. Then I can arrange the gathers. The pattern suggests you concentrate them along the outer part of the leg, so that's what I did. When sewing these seams, I made sure to have the ruffles facing up to avoid the fabric getting pulled into the machine. After I serged the seams, I also unpicked any gathering stitches that remained visible on the outside of the garment. Then I pressed the seam allowances down towards the ruffles with the help of my tailor's ham, and the shorts were done. I finished the shorts, I tried them on, and they fit pretty well. Yeah, so now I'm just looking up the instructions on how to do the top. And with the top, or like the bodice, there's actually 3 layers of fabric on their original one, which is the outer layer, the interlining, which would be the same as we did for the shorts, and then an actual lining. I believe I only cut 2 layers for the top, because one of the reasons why they tell you to then line the interlining, you know what I mean, like for the actual lining, is because they added cups to theirs, and then they didn't want that to be visible on the outer like garment. But I'm not adding cups, so yeah, let's start pinning stuff together.
In the end, I decided to line the top, so I'm basically making 2 bodices and then sewing them to each other. I started with the fronts, pinning each front piece to a side front piece with right sides together, and then carefully sewing them together. I serged the edges of the front pieces as well as the bottom edge of the bodice ruffles, just like before. Then I pressed those seams. Next, I pinned 1 front piece to each short edge of the back pieces along the side seams with right sides together and stitched them in place before serging the edges and pressing the seam allowances towards the back.
Made a mistake. So I sewed the ruffles together like in a circle as I did for the legs, but that's not what I'm supposed to do. You're supposed to attach them to each other to make like a longer piece. This fabric is a nightmare to unpick. Before I do anything though, I'm starting to get hungry, and clearly I'm not paying as much attention as I was earlier, so I think I need to go refuel. Why am I never in focus, god damn it? Anyway, as I was saying, I think I'm gonna go refuel and then I'll come back and tackle this again. Also, just by putting this around me, I'm wearing a bra underneath this t-shirt, and like this is a little bit of a baggy t-shirt. I feel like the cups are supposed to go right here, so this is where the seam is. I feel like I have too much space, so I don't know if I'll leave it baggy because it is sleepwear, so I guess it doesn't matter that much, or if I'll like adjust it to make it a little bit tighter so it's a bit more like fitted. I'm gonna think about it while I eat my lunch.
When I came back to this, I decided to try to unpick as gently as possible so I wouldn't have to do any weirder problem solving. I don't know how, but I managed to unpick both seams without ripping this fabric, which has to be some kind of miracle. So I guess you can call me Saint Olga now. With that done, I could sew the ruffle as I was supposed to, which is by joining them along one of the short edges. I used the previous needle holes to sew along the same line without having to do any seam allowance math. If there's something I'm good at, is finding ways to avoid doing math. For the sides, I took them in about 1 centimeter on each side. I also serged all those edges again and pressed them, as well as pressed in the hem allowance just like I did for the leg ruffles. Next, I top stitched the hem around the ruffle.
And just like I did for the leg ruffles, I added a couple of lines of gathering stitches along the top edge.
Right, the next thing on the instructions is to make little spaghetti straps. I can think of nothing I want to do less right now than make tiny little straps out of this fabric. I don't think it's going to hold up for very long because either I'm serging the edges and then the straps are going to be too bulky to turn, or my experience with this fabric and the stuff I've made before is any edge that's not serged is going to come undone quickly. So I'm thinking I could use ribbon instead, like a tiny ribbon. I was thinking white. I think it'll be stronger, I think it'll be easier, and I think it'll look cute, or just as cute. And then I'll use the same ribbon to do the lacing up the front. So I think that's a better solution. So let me go and grab it. You might remember this ribbon from the skirt I made, the Christmas skirt. This was what I used to make the little snowflakes. And this turned out just a teeny tiny bit smaller than what they have you do. So actually it probably is the same size because they have you cut 1 inch wide strips, fold them in half and sew, but you have seam allowance. So by the time you actually turn it, it probably is, because this is like just under half of an inch. It's 1 centimeter, which is 3/8 of an inch if I'm not mistaken. So I think it's just about right. Then now we need to like fiddle around with the bra strap situation. I've never done that before, so I need to read carefully. I have a tendency to not do that.
Okay, so for the adjustable straps, I had to go look for a step-by-step tutorial online because it was my first time and I wasn't getting how to do it from the instructions on Woo.com, but it turns out it's actually really easy. So first I cut 2 20-inch pieces of ribbon. Then I added one of the adjusting little bits to one ribbon. Basically, I just thread the ribbon through one hole and out the other. I repeat this for both of them, obviously. On one end, I fold in the edge of the ribbon and sew that down on the machine. Next, I thread the other end of the ribbon through a ring. Then I pass that same end through the adjusting bit as well, in the same way, in through one hole and out the other. Then I cut 2 inches off the end of each ribbon and thread this smaller piece through the ring as well. To attach it to the top, I pin the free end of the ribbon to the front of the bodice, and the small ribbon I just threaded through the ring gets pinned to the back. The pattern suggests we pin the strap about 2 inches from the center back, so that's what I did. Anyway, with the straps pinned in place, I also pinned the lining to the bodice along the top edge with right sides together, encasing the straps. I stitched the 2 layers together, making sure to backstitch over the straps for a little extra strength. I also serged and pressed the seam allowances. Next, I pinned the ruffle to the bottom edge of just the main layer of the bodice with right sides together, keeping the lining free. I started by matching the seam of the ruffle to the center back of the bodice, and then pulled on my gathering stitches until the ruffle measured the same as the bottom edge of the bodice, and then distributed the gathers evenly. I found this ruffle was a lot more ruffly than the leg ones though. When I was happy with how the gathers looked, I stitched the ruffle in place, making sure that it's facing up while I sew, just like before. Then I serged the raw edges and pressed the seam allowances up towards the bodice. I also took the time here to press in the seam allowance of the bottom edge of the lining. With that pressed, I stitched the center front seams of the top closed. I serged the seam and flipped the whole top right side out before pressing it. I could then pin the folded edge of the lining over the stitching line of the ruffles and top stitch that on the machine. Lastly, I have to add the eyelets to the front so I can actually lace this closed. I marked their placement first with a heat erasable pen. Then I set up my eyelet station. I like to cover my desk with a blanket to muffle the noise and avoid scratching it, and obviously grab my hammer. I use the Eyelet kit from Hemline, and I find it works really well considering how often I add eyelets to things anyway. Every time I do this, I'm surprised by how cathartic it is to hammer eyelets in. I don't know what that says about the state of my mental health, but anyways, with that done, I was ready for the reveal.
Yeah, I think it turned out really cute. It fits pretty well. I think the shorts fit really, really well, and the top, I probably shouldn't have done the little decrease at the sides because it fits my mannequin very well, but it is a little bit tight on me. Because of the way it laces up at the front, you can have a little bit more space or less space depending on what you want to do. So I think it's okay in this situation, but if I make another set of this, I won't take out that extra side seam. I don't know how long lasting eyelets on this material are going to be, so that's just kind of a remains to be seen type of situation. What's up, bud? Hello. Bye. But yeah, I think overall it turned out really cute, and I had a lot of fun making it. I learned a few new techniques, like I learned how to do the adjustable bra strap, or like adjustable straps in general, so that's nice. For me, trying this pattern for the first time, it was challenging enough to keep it kind of interesting and exciting without being so difficult that it was frustrating. And I mean, I did make this in a day, so maybe it wasn't that difficult. Yeah, the most annoying thing about this set was really just the fabric, because I find chiffon is annoying to work with because it moves all of this. Like, it has all this movement and it very easily like shifts. It's not as user friendly, I guess, as like a cotton poplin where you're just sewing and it like the fabric is super stable and it doesn't budge. And the other thing I'm struggling with right now is that my sewing machine pedal, I don't know why it does this, but it's like the third time now. I'm pressing the pedal, but the machine, the needle isn't moving like I'm pressing the pedal. Like there's some kind of contact that isn't doing like working. And the thing is, it gets very annoying when you're sewing and like I'm pressing the pedal and the needle just stops because it stops making contact, and then I have to like press the pedal a bunch in a bunch of different positions to kind of get it to work. It's really hard to control the speed, and it just makes things really, really annoying and really difficult. Either tonight or tomorrow, I'm gonna ask my partner to fix the pedal for me. I'm also going to be looking for a replacement pedal. That's what's happening with my sewing machine. I don't know if you care, but now you know. As always, everything that I mention that I can link, I will link in the description. And if you've made it this far, I think you should consider subscribing to my channel. I put out a new video most Fridays, and I also post a lot of short form content here and also on Instagram and TikTok. That's everything for me for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.